I just wanted to go back for a second. Is this okay with you guys? Just a tiny bit back and then go forward from here. I just emphasize that it takes a long time. So these are people who are going to be working with you, people with EDS are going to have, or even hypermobility, dysfunction, they're going to have a long time with working with you. So that's great. We have the time and hopefully the patience to work with them for long term. And then just reminding that working too hard, I was reminded of that. And I've actually, I think, frustrated a client recently because I basically told her that she's working too hard and that she needs to stop working so hard, because if she doesn't stop working so hard, she's just going to cause more trouble. And I don't think she really loved hearing that. But I had to tell her that she's just one of those, I'm going to work hard because if I work hard, I get better. Yeah. So they need to work hard, but in a very gentle way and respect what's going on in their body. So, and then I also wanted to go back and talk a little bit more about that connection between different parts of the body. So if I get one glute to fire, then I might have to go back and fix the shoulder on the opposite side. But these fascial connections, the connections through the body, are really important. And I'll give you an example of this towards the end here. Just because it really is so, they're so connected. I think some of you have experienced some of that already in your own body even, but just even thinking about, okay, if we change something in the body on one side, so say I change the alignment of a pelvis or a hip on my right side, that's been kind of out of position, it's gonna, if I'm up, I'm gonna exaggerate, right? Most people don't walk around like this, but if I exaggerate that, you can see that if I'm up here, this shoulder is affected, both shoulders are affected, my torso is in fact affected. So if I come down here, then I'm affected up here still. And in somebody who's already having a hard time figuring out where they are in space and where their body's in space, this reason for this might actually be that I'm holding this shoulder in position. And once I go here, this shoulder might no longer feel like it's in its socket. But it's just this, listen to them, be patient with them. And yes, you'll get there eventually. They will get better. Okay, and so we talked about that. We talked about how it's not cheating to use supports. And I think I mentioned back maybe 2 or 3 times ago, we were talking about neck braces, and that I had gone over this doctor's lecture, and he was recommending no soft neck collars. Really a firm collar is what they need, not a soft one, something that actually really supports so they can relax the overworking muscles. So using support might actually make their muscles relax enough that they can relax the overused muscles and actually find the correct alignment or find the correct way. Yes, go ahead, Anna.
So for example, if you're struggling with kind of a slight hip hike and tightest QL and psoas, would having a back brace compressing that?
Yes, it could, that's the concept. So something that would make it so that those muscles that are overworked, like say the QL is totally overstressed and over holding all the time. The idea is if I support that QL, if I put something there that takes away some of the work that that muscle needs to do, then maybe that muscle can finally relax. And in its relaxing, then things can settle into the position. Like then the QL relaxes, then the pelvis settles down. But sometimes your body won't do that, or a body won't do that because it doesn't feel stable otherwise, right? So then you would use that as a tool to relax and to start being able to access things that you couldn't access or somebody couldn't access. So then maybe I can start working on the QL on the other side, or the glute medius underneath it, or something else that might give me the support that I need, right? Yeah. So it's definitely not cheating. And we've mentioned orthotics. I really think for people whose feet are flattening, orthotics might be a really good option. However, for somebody who's really hypermobile, if you put a very firm orthotic in the shoe, what's going to happen? Right.
It's gonna move the bones around.
It's gonna move the bones around. It's gonna move the ankle around. It's gonna move the foot, well, foot first, then it's gonna move the ankle. Then it's gonna move the knee, then it's gonna move the hip, right? So maybe not the firmest of firm orthotics, may not be the absolute way, but I usually start them with an over the counter and just see if they can tolerate it. A flexible one over the counter. And then if they tolerate that, or if they don't tolerate it, if they tolerate it, I have them keep that. If they don't tolerate it, then maybe they need to see a podiatrist, but not all podiatrists understand hypermobility. So it would have to be somebody who understands and can accommodate for the hypermobility. And they're maybe go ahead, Lane. Okay, I was gonna say they're maybe gonna have to really gradually work into wearing a support like that. Right, they may not be able to just get them. The advice is always go into gradually, but it may take them a lot longer to be able to realign over an orthotic than somebody else.
So a person whose foot flattens when they walk,
Yes.
does that person necessarily experience pain and discomfort? Is there a way that that person could exist forever without any changes? So I'm thinking of the whole idea of, the correct model of the foot is not a rigid thing. It flexes as you walk. And so I'm wondering, how would it be if a person never got corrected, never got supported with that kind of foot?
Yeah, and usually what we see, like I see people who even aren't on the hypermobility spectrum, so even just people who have really faulty mechanics or a floppy arch or incorrect structure or less than ideal structure, I should say. And what happens is they get along for quite some time and then they start having injuries like tibialis anterior, because that's on the medial side, right? Tibialis anterior injuries as they're falling in on the navicular falling down, or the weight of the medial malleolus and everything falling inward constantly against that tendon. They might start having Achilles issues. They might start having, so they start getting bunions. They might start having very much of a hallux valgus. So you might, and then the other that you see, if their feet are fine, what you see is the knees start hurting, because that's an incredible stress, valgus stress on the knees. So they may not have, like my son has no foot pain. He just has knee pain, and he's the really floppy one. My really floppy, poor child, my really floppy son has no foot pain. He has knee pain, but it's his feet that are driving him into the valgus knees, and so that the patella is subluxing laterally because he's falling in so much medially with pressure. But if you line him up or have him stand on his tippy toes, he's in perfect alignment. So his knees are. It's just that with the pressure falling in all the time. So it would be one over time. And so some people are fine for a really long time because they're strong, because they're fit, because they're healthy otherwise. But then eventually I see a lot of those injuries, either plantar fasciitis or the tibialis posterior, or all of those injuries start happening. Yeah. And remember, if their arch isn't holding, they're not having as much shock absorption either. But on the flip side, if you put too much support there, like you said, Lena, the foot is supposed to be malleable to some extent. So on the flip side, if it's a super hard support, that could be too much for somebody who's used to being loose and bendy and movable, malleable. So there has to be a balance somehow. Yeah. All right. So exercise do's and don'ts, we kind of went over this a little bit, but here we go, really in here. So do reformer, footwork on the reformer. So we talked about closing the chain. So creating support for these people so that they feel like their body, we're helping them connect their body to top and bottom. So the more in outer space they are, the harder it's going to be for them. That's actually true for everybody, but it's specifically true here. So things that we can really do, footwork on the reformer. And I mentioned I had that one client who had multiple disc injuries, and she was the only one ever that could not even tolerate the footwork on the reformer. But you start with lightweight and then move forward. Quadruped. You can always position the body with extra support, so you can put a little towel under the arch if they're just moving all over the place and create a nice support for them. You can use the push-through bar on the Cadillac versus the rollback bar. With the springs, you can keep the legs moving together rather than one up, one down in opposition, or one out, one up, right? So not like this kind of action, but more just together all the time. And then keep movements small and contained. That's their goal. Don't allow them to overwork the muscles in an attempt to make the body stronger. I got it. I'm just going to activate my abs. Okay, wait, let me get into them. I got it. Now let's move. Like, but now you can't move, right? That's not how we move around in space. So if they can't, what's so hard is they don't feel the muscles activating some of the time. So they try and feel the muscle activating. But in doing so, they're pulling so hard that they pull, and pulling that hard can pull their joints out of position. That's what we mentioned last time. So large, and it's also wrong. It's large pull activation, large muscle activation versus small stabilizer activation. So I would not do feet in the straps, especially on the reformer. That's just too much. Too much pull, too much. One leg can pull up the hip and pelvis on the other side. Larger movements should all be contained, right? They don't need to increase range of motion movement. They need to find control and centering. Arms and straps, the bar is better. Could you do arms and straps eventually? Yes, absolutely. But I would start with this more stable surface if you can. Okay, to stretch or not to stretch, Lane's question, famous question. So does a hypermobile person stretch? How much do they stretch? So we talked about no need for increased range of motion. We talked about that they will get some relief from stretching. So what are we doing in the stretches? We are stretching within their range without moving into their hypermobile joints. So gentle stretching, longer hold times to help release things. So when stretching contracted muscles, the joints are fragile though, so we can pull the joints out of place rather than actually stretch the muscle. So choose carefully what position they're in. So pigeon pose is my least favorite one for this population, and they all love it. Don't like it. It's really not a very good, not an easy place to stay aligned, but they all want to do pigeon pose. So keep your eyes on pigeon pose. Choose stretches that are in good alignment, not ones where many joints can be poorly aligned. There it is. Figure 4 on the back instead of pigeon.
Is pigeon contraindicated because you've got the weight of the body on the joint?
You've got so much going on in pigeon pose. So you've got the figure 4 in front. You've got the pelvis coming out of alignment in the back. You've got the SI joint is getting out of whack. I mean, there's no way. You've got the knee that can dislocate in that 4 position with the weight of the body on there. You cannot be in good alignment in a pigeon pose, like good alignment. You can't be in a square alignment in pigeon pose. You just can't. That is not what that position is. So no matter how good you are at pigeon pose, you will still be offset because it's such an extreme position, right? So that's why. Yeah, Anna, go ahead.
Along that same vein, I do a seated, more pretzel, leg crossed on top of leg instead of pigeon. Does that kind of make sense? So that still would be not ideal, but better.
Much better. I call it double pigeon. I heard someone call it double pigeon, where you're crossing over in kind of that figure 4, so keeping that kind of box shape.
Yeah.
A lot better because you can keep both butts heavy weighted down, and then you do it on both sides. So I give them that one instead of this one if nothing else convinces them.
Okay, great. So it's good enough that it's okay.
It's usually good enough, and the only thing to watch there are the knees if they have knee subluxations.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yoga. So I'm not totally opposed to yoga. I'm only opposed to yoga when they're going to yoga to stretch. They need to go into yoga and contain themselves. So they're concentrating. Sorry.
Bless you.
Thank you. they're concentrating on pulling everything back in, not on loosening everything away, right? So they're gonna come in and work on pulling leg into leg in all their lunges, keeping their pelvis square. If they're gonna rotate, they're working on holding stable. This is a great place for them to work hard. Here's where they can work really hard in containing themselves. So it's not about who can be more mobile over there next to me. It's about how much can I contain myself. And if they can go to yoga with that in mind, then it could actually really strengthen them. So, but it's just getting in the right mindset and not comparing to, and when you're used to being super flexible, it's hard not to want to go to that length and extend myself out that far. And when you see somebody else doing something you know you could do, but you know you do it in wrong alignment, it's hard to hold back. It's like, oh, I just want to do that because I can, you know. So but I think there could be a lot of value in this if they can do it with that in mind. Okay, yes, go ahead.
I know you do yoga. Can you recommend kind of a style or a, I mean, obviously probably not hot yoga, but more.
Yeah. So
how it would be framed.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do not recommend hot yoga. I will never go and do hot yoga. It is just too much. It turned into a wet noodle, and it's too much to contain myself. Even if I want to, I can't. But I do. My favorite one is a teacher that I have that just mixes the yoga. It's very much a vinyasa type of yoga, flowing kind of yoga. But she's very good about cueing for alignment. So that's the kind of teacher that you want. And in fact, I went to a class that was an advanced, like a 2-3 level or more advanced level class. And 3 people got up and left the class after the first 10 minutes because we were just going slowly through a sun salutation type of movement. And they were like, I guess she said, as they left, she said, well, I guess they thought that this wasn't advanced enough for them, but they only stayed for the first 15 minutes. She said, but advanced yoga is doing it well and containing your body and being able to do the movements in good alignment. And so, and then she would progress the class to the right level. So I got good challenge in there, but it really is, every time I do yoga, I am the one in the class totally sweating. I look around, everybody's like casual, chill, and I'm dripping sweat because I'm working so hard to keep that alignment and keep my body contained in there. So yeah, I thought everybody did that, but apparently not. So okay, so this is kind of that new thing that I added in here, and I want to talk about. Think about what muscles hold the joints in position. So I was trying to think about how you go from here, right? We talked about all the joints and where they go, and I think we can do a quick review as to kind of what things you need to watch for at each joint. But one thing to think about is what actually holds the joint in its place. And the easiest example for me is the rotator cuff and the biceps or the shoulder. And that seems obvious to me when I think about it, because if we think about our shoulder with its limited socket, right, the thing that's holding this up here is the rotator cuff tendons, the ones at the back, the one underneath, and the biceps tendon, that they hold my shoulder up here. So if I have somebody who subluxes and I want to help them, what do I need to do? I need to do those exercises, rotator cuff exercise and biceps curls. That should replace the shoulder. Now, somebody who moves easily. So that's the beauty of it when we want to put them back into position. And these people, a lot of them are having minor subluxations. So the example I want to show you, and I'm going to hopefully Tiziana can edit the video for me. Is a client I saw on yesterday. I see her twice a week, every week. She is hypermobile. I don't know if she has EDS or if she's just on the hypermobility spectrum. She's never been tested. She had a hip replacement on the right. She had been in a car accident years and years ago, and that hip, she has dysplasia on that hip from the car accident, some osteoarthritis. She is overweight. So it probably wore out faster than it may have if she was not. But so she had the hip replaced, and we've been working on trying to get glute med activation. And then we went to work on it, started working on her hip. I got her into knee stretch on the reformer, as you know, one of my favorites, hand on the bar, knee stretch on the reformer, and she didn't lose her leg. She starts, she didn't, I swear I didn't make her lose her leg. She starts rotating her shoulder around and going, oh, my shoulder's not right. And so you would think in a closed chain position, which is why I also like that knee stretch, is closed chain shoulders, closed chain feet, that it would give her some stability. But she's had this long history. It's a long time before she got that hip replaced. She had this long history of dysfunctional movement on that right side. So we had to stop the whole session on the hip and figure out what we were going to do for that shoulder, because it's just so distracting and so not feeling good. And all I had her do was get up. We tried a little, she wanted to try a little serratus press first on the Cadillac. That didn't do it. And so she's like, well, what should I do? I'm like, let's do some rotator cuff. We did internal rotation and then we did external rotation. She's like, oh, I think it's feeling better. I'm like, yep, let's do biceps. We did biceps. She came out, she's like, oh, now I can move my shoulder. Right. So it's really that simple, dare I say. But the reason that I went to those rotator cuff exercises is because they are what hold the shoulder in its socket. So if we want to think about, okay, somebody can't feel like they're right in their pelvis, this is harder because it's bigger and the weight bearing area. But the glutes, the hip rotators, they're what's going to hold my SI joint in place, or straighten out my SI joint, or hold it straight. Now this would be bilateral contraction. So I know, Anna, you know what I do. You've seen me do that. Is I have people lay on their belly and try and lift their knees up. So that activates quads, and then from there lift up the legs. So we're at both legs together. So we're activating glutes around SI joint. You can do that parallel, you can do that in turnout, and that should help SI joint realign itself if both legs are doing it together. If you do one leg, what are we doing? We're dropping one side of the pelvis and lifting the other, no matter how good we are, right? There is some of that. We want to do both legs together, activating pull on the SI joint, right? So for the hip, hamstrings in the back, psoas in the front, TFL on the side, and glutes, right? That's what's going to hold my hip in place. So if somebody says, my hip's not in place, my hip feels like it's not right, those are the muscles you need to attack. Everything that crosses from the thigh into the buttocks, or from the thigh into the pelvis, I should say, right? And then if we want to look at ankle, we really need to do something about that leg inversion. All right. Right, we can look at peroneus longus because it's crossing underneath, tibialis anterior, tibialis posterior, not anterior, excuse me, tibialis anterior is coming on top. We could look at tibialis anterior, but I meant to write tibialis posterior here, coming under the medial malleolus, under the foot. Toe extensors, toe flexors, right? So we are looking at how do we stabilize that ankle. It's out of place. Yep, let's get back to those little TheraBand exercises, point, flex point, inside, outside motions, right? We need to get those muscles firing to hold our bones in place. If it feels like it's in the middle of the foot, then we need to do bottom of foot exercises, right? If they feel like they're dropping too much and they can't get their arches up, we have to activate those muscles for them and help find that alignment. And then we can go back to whatever we were doing. So as soon as I got her shoulder feeling better, then we could go back and do that exercise for her hip that we wanted to do, but we couldn't do it. And she couldn't get her hip underneath her if her shoulder is falling out of its socket, right? So just to have you think around that. And if you think about it and you come back with questions about, okay, so how do we do something for another part of the body? Or what do we do if I'm happy to try and puzzle it out with you? Yeah, so think about it and see but the reason I bring this up is because you guys know this, you know the anatomy well enough to know what crosses all the joints and how you're going to activate it. On the flip side of that, if one of these muscles is pulling too much, it's going to pull that joint from the back or the front or the side. So that's also to consider, right? Why is it not holding straight? Why, so what is going to hold it in place? Why is it being twisted or turned? What's holding too much and what's not holding? So that would be the other way to think about it. And then we just stabilize the joints using the muscles with the right amount of force, right? We're not lifting cars, we're putting body pieces together. So depending on how big those muscles are, if they're small muscles, which most of the time they will be, since they're stabilizers, the effort has to be medium, not gripping. So, okay. Exercise specifics with the reformer. Exercise where we're closing the chain, so footwork, focus on that actual foot strengthening component in the footwork. To create support, I've gone a lot to using that squishy ball right between the feet now. So squishy ball between the feet and then almost putting the feet in the middle of the bar and pressing that against the bar, because what's going to happen there is it's going to squish into my foot and help me hold my arch up. Right, do you see? So if I put my foot under here and just hold it between my ankles, that's different than if I put my feet in the middle of it and squish it against the bar and then try and get inside heel and outside heel both down, or if I'm on heels, or both level, then I end up with a little support for my arch as well. Yeah, I can show you what that looks like if you can't picture it. Then knee stretches, I really like. Go ahead, Lane. Yeah.
I was just going to say, it seems to me that the sensation of that in the arch is also helpful in terms of feeding back the sensory neurons, yeah, right, into whether that's actually happening, right, yeah, instead of just empty in space where there's no feedback coming back in.
Yeah, so proprioception again, right? And we're closing chain, we're creating more support, we're giving them a little more surface area. So all those things, but that proprioception piece that we talked about also, definitely. And then we're back at knee stretches. Again, closed chain on, because it's hands and feet are closed and knees are down, like we've got a lot of pressure points that compact my body, don't stretch me away, right? It's called stretch exercise, but it's not, it's a compressing exercise, really. Prone on the bar, pushing the foot bar is one of my favorites because there's a lot of ways to connect, right? It really can teach that connection. Again, we've got weight pulling us back to the bar. Yes, so if I want to work those shoulders or the body, I've got weight pulling me into the bar rather than pulling me away. So I'm closing the weight against my body. And then we have glute series on the box or on the arc. I really like that glute series for the SI joint, for that stability in the core. And then reverse knee stretches is a lot harder than knee stretches because I'm pulling the weight, but I really make that about my shoulder blades. So that control of the shoulder blades going down and the movement's so small and we're contained. So they're not going to lose an arm over there or a leg over there, right? They're really contained in that space. So it's a nice way to start having the pulling rather than the ropes, for example, where those are kind of anywhere, but it's a fixed wooden reformer or metal reformer that's not moving. Yeah. So it's a pretty solid surface. And then Cadillac all with a push through bar, seated double lats. One of my favorites to close that chain and feel the connection into the body here and that lifting up of the glutes, right? As you pull down, squeeze and grow up. Baby swan, if their shoulders are stable enough to go in front. And the modification, I don't know if I've ever shown you that modification with the chest on the arc for baby swan. Yeah, have I? Or no? No, don't remember. I can show you. Let me show you that. The rest of them are serratus press, which is just closed bar against hands, right? Hamstring stretch, we're closing feet against bar. They actually really love this one. And they can see what their feet are doing. So they can really pay attention to what, oh, look at, I didn't realize my foot actually looked like that, you know? I didn't realize my foot actually was on the very edge of my pinky toe till I saw it. And then seated single arm lat pull, maybe with the side bend, if they can contain themselves. So if I'm doing that exercise with them, where they're going with the bar, I'm usually pushing the bar, I'm holding the bar and pulling it in towards them. Or if they were strong, I would really, and going towards mermaid, I'm standing behind them, pulling the bar backwards so it doesn't get away with them and they lose their shoulder and shoulder blade, right? I keep them in, I keep that tension inward. So let me show you that swan, baby swan. So this is one of the ways where I find it's really hard to get people, sorry, let me just change the angle of my camera. You might have a hard time seeing that. I find that it's hard to get people who have had shoulder subluxations to stretch their thoracic spine and to find that back extensor control. So this is one of the ways I think it can work. Sorry, 1 second, I will rearrange. I think you'll be able to see well enough now. Okay. So I can take that arc, I can spring from above. And basically, I will push the bar in for them. Or down for them, and I bring them up here. So I can start, see how my shoulder, I'm now above the bar, rather than I would be below the bar. But up here, I can start working into a safe extension. And again, I'd be standing here pulling this bar back in this direction. And then I can have them go forward and have them work on pulling their shoulders and their sockets and coming up into the baby swan from here. And then going forward. So going forward where they can tolerate, where they still feel connected, and then coming upward. Yeah. So this is just a nice pre-swan version, trying to get that thoracic extension. Yes, go ahead, Anna.
So is it because, again, because like I kind of what you were saying, that you're on top of the bar to press down, that you're more able to stabilize the shoulders?
Yeah,
Angling.
exactly. It's because I'm above. Rather than if I was laying flat, my arms would be over. So then I would have the armpit, I like to call it the armpit ball, falling downward, right? And that's really easy to sublux then.
Right. So you're already putting them
here,
in the place of control.
exactly. I'm much more controlled here. Yeah. Okay. And then all right. Okay, so on the chair, seated footwork is really nice because it's closed chain and I can work on that sitting posture. Upstretch or pike for the advanced ones, right? That's a beautiful closed chain exercise. Feet are on the bar, shoulders are on the bar. I can really work in between work my center there. I can working through the shoulders there, and it's actually really safe and really approximates the shoulders, right? One of those exercises that helps the shoulder go back into its socket. Standing balance on the foot bar. The prone series, I love the prone series, especially, you just have to make sure they're aligned right. So I really want my shoulder, my hand in line with my shoulder, not in front and not under. Yeah, just right underneath me. And then I can do serratus press, triceps, I can swan, I can powerhouse. It's all really well contained. And then again, glute series there would be nice. For springboard, I would start with the bar itself, with the bar rather than handles. Standing lat pulls to connect, so connecting lats and connecting into that thoracolumbar fascia, to the pelvis. Bridging with lat pulls, so laying down, lat pulling, and adding the bridge up, if their bridge is stable enough. And then knees over bar and feet against the bar. Knees over bar is really stable and easy, kind of contains them again. The springs are pulling them back a little bit. And then feet against the bar, they have that tension. So it's a nice place to start that leg extension, a nice graduation from footwork to feet on the bar, rather than having loose feet in straps all over the place. Yeah, so it's a nice progression from there. For the barrel, the side stretches can be good, but even better, the isometrics and side lying on the barrel. So you can do it on the arc as well, but holding that isometric position is really nice. And we talked about isometrics sometimes being okay and sometimes being too much. So if the isometric was too much, you could just do a really small motion up and down, just so that they keep some motion, but that they're really having to work to hold their torso. The idea is to strengthen everything along their sides. Yeah, Lane, go ahead.
No, I'm not familiar with the terminology of that exercise,
Yeah.
isometrics on side lying. I've probably done it, but I have no idea what it is.
Let me show you. So basically I could go here, right? And I can support if I need to with my hand or hands at first. But the idea is to find my neutral and just hold, right? So I can make it harder. I can make it easier by getting some support here and pushing in, but that would be the idea. And then, but if the isometric is too much, then I can do, even with the hand support, I can just do a little up, down, just to keep them from over grabbing. If they're an over grabber, you might not want them in isometric. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I can also do the stretch here. It's a nice supported stretch. You just watch for the shoulders, yeah. So maybe contain the shoulders if you need to, but otherwise it's just a really nice contained stretch. They can't go too far here because the barrel's in the way of them going too far, and they can actually relax. So because this is carrying my weight, I can really relax over here and allow this stretch. Yeah, in places. So this would be a great one for people with tight QL, people with tight, even into the glute and leg, I can extend through. People, even with tight upper back, if they're okay with their shoulders, arms overhead. So just a really nice exercise. And you can make it a lot easier than what I just did by having them do it here. So the isometric could start right here, right? And then just trying to take the arms off here, right? And then trying a little motion here, and then taking it. So you can make a nice progression. Yeah. And you could do a lot of that on the arc too if you don't have a big barrel. Yeah. Let's see. Swan dive. I love that one too. Do you guys know a swan dive too? Right. So going forward, over, and then coming up, keeping it tiny at first, even an isometric, and then a little motion, and then making that motion bigger. So that will help get those stabilizers on in the back as well. A very contained quad stretch. It's surprising how many hypermobile people have tight quads. But what happens when they go to stretch their quads is all kinds of craziness, right? All kinds of like, oh, I'll stretch my quad. Yeah, I'm stretching my quad, or I'm stretching my quad, or right. So contain it, put it all together. Hips go forward, bottom forward. I get this nice control and connection. Now I've got a good quad stretch and everything aligned. Yeah, so not some crazy posture, which you guys would never allow anyway, I know. Thoracic stretch. I've been surprised. Recently, I've had a couple of new clients here. And I get them, I love the thoracic stretch on the barrel, and I do it with everybody. And I've had 2 clients here, new, who've not done it. And it was a huge stretch for them, so much that they were like, oh my gosh, that was the hardest thing we did. And I said, really? That's the hardest thing you've done here? So I find people, and one of them is hypermobile, and I find that people just really have so much tension in their upper back. Hypermobile or not, just from our posture being so forward all the time. But it's a great one on the upper barrel, just even doing the easiest version, right? So for me, the easiest is here, hands supporting, and then just deciding how much to go back. That doesn't seem like much to me, but it was a lot for them. So just starting easy there and letting that open. Again, with that nice support, I'm not that worried about their joints going out of position because I'm supported, it's limited, right? They can't just disappear into some funky, weird extension and the spine moving. So pretty contained. And then the glute series from a flexed position is also nice. So that could be arc or barrel, where I'm laying over on my belly and my legs are in what the negative space and they're just coming to neutral, from below to neutral. So that I'm taking the lower back out of it, right? So many hypermobile people lay on their belly and try and do glute series, and what happens is they just drop, exactly. Their vertebrae just drop forward, and some of them are not even just arching, some of them the actual vertebrae are dropping forward. That's how loose they are. So this is a nice way to really isolate glutes and not have that lumbar extension moment even available. Yeah. So the arc, similar to all of these things, side bending, isolating glutes. I use the arc on side sleeper a lot on the reformer to take QL out of the picture and get more glute medius involved, because if I'm in a stretch, side bend stretch, and then I go to activate glute medius, my QL is a little on stretch, so it's less sufficient in that position. So that's a nice thing to use the arc for. I do that with the foot in the strap for sideline, or even sideline. I don't know how recently you guys have done sideline in the arc. It's a lot harder than just flat on the mat. So if you want a really good butt burn, do it on the arc. And I've had people who don't have an arc do it on a squishy ball, the squishy ball here and laying on their side. So just put a little side bend in their back, low back, and then have them try and do glute series, side leg series. So if they're a QL grabber, that's a good one to get glute medius on without QL. Yeah.
You're talking about open chain glute series?
Yes, I am, with no weight. Yeah. Or sprung. Well, not glute series, sideline series with a one spring on. Yeah, and you want to be careful, right? That pelvis could be funky, but I think the spring's pulling their like hip into its socket. So I find it less dangerous. I don't lose as many joints as other things with a spring on. Yeah, Anna, go ahead.
When you do the sideline spring work with the leg strap, some people do it with the spring in front and behind. Obviously, it's getting different work, but when it's from behind, would that be more ideal for a hypermobile person?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say behind is going to be easier to activate glute medius versus TFL psoas, which is what we want. However, if you put the spring behind a lot of those hypermobile people, what's going to happen? Right, they're going to lumbar extend, and then I'm going to be in this position with the extension rather than in my neutral with extension. So you just have to monitor. You just have to monitor what their body can handle. So I actually, most of the time, I keep the spring ever so slightly in front of their body and have them take the leg behind, and I'll stay there and I'll hold that leg in position because it's hard to hold it back. And that spring sometimes gets kind of in their face and that's a little uncomfortable, but putting it behind, I feel like they lose this control a lot of the time. So, but that is the right idea. Yes.
Would you say that you do the spring in front most of the for most people?
I do for most people, unless they're like more of a tight person and I really want to stretch the hip flexor. So then the spring goes behind. So if they're tight, I can put that spring on behind them, and that's going to lengthen the hip for them already. So they're going to be in glute and they're going to be lengthening.
Yeah, it's just interesting because I have always been doing it in front, but balanced body, I just realized they always have it in their book behind.
Oh, interesting.
And I was doing the training, I was like, oh my gosh, I always have it in front. And I've been like, I got to teach it the way, I've got to teach it the right way to them. But yeah. I naturally do it that way, which is how they do it. So interesting.
You do it in behind naturally or in front?
No, balanced body is behind.
Yeah,
I naturally just have always done it wrong from my training and in front.
Yeah, I think, I think you need to pick what's going to be right. again, here I am, why? With my why question. So I think either one is definitely valid, just depending on that body that's in front of you and what you're seeing happening. But that would be my choice, would be a tight person taking it behind, like my runners. It's really my runners, my guy runners, having it behind is way better for them. But my hypermobile, not very strong people, or my in rehab type hypermobile, putting it behind, it just takes them back into that extension, a lot of extension. They cannot keep it. So yeah.
And then there was a third way I learned from Body Arts and Science, where you put it on the center eye bolt of the slider, and then you line the person up directly in line with the eye bolt, and then you have basically you have an equal opportunity, both psoas stretch or glutes, or work or stretch, depending. It's just in the neutral point, and you don't prejudice front or back.
Mm-hmm.
And that way it's easy for me. It's easy to watch because I can hold that alignment of that body, or touch the parts that I want them to stabilize, whether the spring goes front or back.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and the only thing I would say there is that then your bar has to be a little higher.
yes.
Which means that the spring has more of a diagonal. So the line of pull is going to be a little bit. And
No, it's on the slider. It's on the slide crossbar.
Right, but their body can't be, the spring has to be a little higher than their body, right? Rather than right down at.
Oh, that's true. That is true. Yes.
So there's just a little bit different pull. So that's okay. It's just being aware of what's happening in the side body at that point, because if they're being pulled from up.
I understand now. Yes, I see what you mean. Yeah.
So that would be what to watch for there. I mean, I think all of them are great and useful, definitely. Just there's little things with each one, and to think about why you might do it one way or another.
Great.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, and then we did talk about this a little bit in the last slideshow too, that whole idea of rib pain associated and back pain associated with ribs, and how having the weight on the belly and just laying there and breathing can sometimes do the work of realigning without us having to do. So we talked about ways with this population that we need to have them fix their own bodies, right? So I don't like to go in, and I can, and I have done it. I've gone in and done little things to correct rib cage, but I don't go in there and manually adjust them. I actually put them in position. One of them I use is this kind of a position. I have them go into a rotation and then resist. So they're doing the work themselves. So that's kind of a manual technique, but a way that they can readjust their ribs on their own would be laying down with a heavy weight on the rib cage and just breathing. The breath moves the ribs. Inspiration, expanding, expiration, lowering. With that weight there, the idea is that the ribs will actually find their way home into the right position. So we talked about that with the recommendation from the doctor that did this talk that I listened to was a small ball at the belly button. We talked about how a bigger ball is a lot more comfortable for some people, laying on the belly, and then on the belly, and on the back, just a weight on the belly, breathing. Yeah, also singing, using high and low notes singing, or playing a wind instrument can really help with rib and lower back pain. So it's just that big inspirations, expirations can really be helpful. So if you know hypermobile people, tell them, start singing. It's great. Pick up a wind instrument. It's a great tool for you. Yeah, so that will help actually keep strength in those intercostals, in the small spinal muscles around the rib cage and the thoracic zone. So that will help create stability. Okay, proprioception, feet and hands. Encourage exercises that increase proprioception. You can use all kinds of tools here, right? Spiky balls, rough surfaces, training on uneven surfaces. Those are great ways to give feedback without having to do anything. So my little spiky, spiky thing that I stand on all the time. You can put people's hands on it too. At the conference, there was somebody who's there with all this new stuff she has, which is like a mat you put on your reformer, even a wrap for the foot bar that's all spiky and pokey. The idea is for proprioception, to increase proprioception. She also had like hand weights that had the grippy, spiky stuff on it. So you can use spiky balls, you can use tools like that. I don't think you need them to be on it 100% of the time, but when people are having a hard time knowing where they are in space, just activating proprioceptors is a great way to get them there. Watch for overgripping of the hands and toes. Teach relaxed grip, so not overworking things that don't need to be working, yeah? Relaxed grips on objects or surfaces, that open hand against the handles or the bar, that also will help keep the wrist right. And then I put in strengthening the feet has to be a passion to succeed. So if somebody wants to strengthen their feet because they don't want to wear orthotics or insoles or something like that, or they want to be able to walk around barefooted, or it is a passion. It is constant. It has to be ingrained into their life. They have to be walking on their tiptoes. They have to be doing calf raises all the time. They have to be on unstable surfaces all the time. They have to do things to constantly wake up and stir those muscles in the feet. So even, I think we talked about this already, even walking barefoot, like some people say, oh, I walk barefoot a lot of the time, that should strengthen my feet. The problem is we're walking barefoot on flat surfaces all the time. We're rarely walking barefoot on uneven surfaces, and that's what's really going to strengthen those small muscles in the feet. If you're walking every day barefoot on the beach, then you'll probably start to have good, strong feet. But walking barefoot every day on a hard surface can just wear out your poor foot pads and cause if your feet are collapsing, then stir up neuromas. And so there's a lot of things that can go wrong walking on that flat surface. So if it's worth it to them, I think it's a great experience anyway to keep working on your feet. I think it's great help for the body, whether or not you can be out of orthotics, but it has to be a passion project. Pain management and treatment. Now we're running out of time, but we can, I think I just have a few more. Yep, that's it. Okay, I'm going to keep you just for 2 more minutes. It's going to really vary based on your client. So what you need to keep in mind is that micro trauma is really common. They're going to have little traumas all the time, little tendon tearing, muscle tearing, and tissue repair is a lot harder. It takes longer. So, and they tend to have more trauma when they're injured. So just being patient, teaching them to be patient with the healing process, not to over push, right? And just to let their body have the time to heal. And then remember, if we're talking about tendons and muscle tearing, right, they have to shorten before we lengthen them again. They have to shorten to scar and heal, and then we can lengthen them again. So allowing that time that it takes, and then stretching again gently. Macro trauma is much more obvious a lot of the time, so they'll have bigger traumas, and that is more frequent, more obvious. So what do we need to do? Stabilize the joint, then strengthen it. And we're going to retrain for proprioception. We need to teach just the right amount of work instead of overusing muscles. Sometimes wearing that skin-tight clothing to help give feedback and proprioception. And then exercising in water because it provides contact with the skin and gives that proprioceptive feedback. And also because they have less body weight to carry. So that might be a place to go from point A to point C, but putting the water in the middle so that they can start doing everything, but just with less weight. And then muscle strength, strengthening without stressing the joints. So really creating that innate stability. Start slow with low load, progress slowly. Avoid extreme stretching, right? We talked about stretching just enough to feel a stretch, but we're not trying to be contortionists anymore, yes? And then while exercising in the water might be best, swimming might not be. Swimming's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things, you're kicking opposite legs, your back is arching, your arms and shoulders are moving a lot in a big, huge range. So swimming might not be. I have one client who's EDS and she loves swimming, but we've had to take her back to swimming with a snorkel to try and help her stay, because she was all over the place. It was just amazing. But we had to take her back to swimming with the snorkel. She didn't turn her head so she could stay straight. And we're really working on either kicking or moving arms, but not both together, because she can't keep her body together when she's doing it. And she's getting better, she's getting stronger. But she, I said, maybe just walk in the water or do some exercise in the water. No, I really want to swim. I'm like, okay, then let's break it up. We'll do part by part. So, yeah, okay, that's it.